May 14th, 1940. Guderian has crossed the Meuse, and now the French scramble to throw him back. The skies fill with bombers as the Allies try to destroy the bridges and halt the panzers. Meanwhile, French armor and infantry move towards the front for a counterattack. Is this the moment that Paris and London have been waiting for, where Republic and Kingdom join together to turn the tide and hold back the Reich? I'm Indy Nidell, and welcome to our World War II miniseries 10 Days in Sedan, where we cover the German thrust through the Ardennes, the rage of the Reich, and the new confrontation between old enemies at Sedan, the crucible where the fate of the Axis and Allies converge. Join me as we explore the course of the battle and its aftermath. Let's kick off with Heinz Guderian's force, which yesterday made it across the Meuse. Now, as the sun rises over Sedan, the Germans have just one thing on their mind: breakout. Overnight, the Germans have managed to finish the first of their pontoon bridges across the Meuse, which will allow them to start bringing their tanks over the river. Actually, the bridge is finished by the 505th Engineer Battalion late last night, and the first vehicle crosses just after midnight as today gets going. The first actual panzer crosses the bridge after dawn at 7:20 a.m. 10 minutes later, the first French counterattack gets underway, making this a crucial moment where literally every second counts. The fate of France could genuinely hinge on whether the French tanks can make it to the Meuse and destroy that bridge before the Germans bring across enough panzers to drive them back. The French forces are to set off from Chemeri, aiming first for Boulson and Connage, before advancing in a line towards the Meuse. If they can't get all the way to the Meuse though, then all might not be lost. Boulson is regarded as an ideal staging position for a counterattack, and Jean Flavigny, commander of the 21st Corps, is hoping to launch a larger assault from there later today with his forces, which arrived overnight. This morning's smaller counterattack will be handled by the 213th Infantry Regiment, each battalion supported by a company of the 7th Tank Battalion. The 205th Infantry Regiment and 4th Tank Battalion are also supposed to be part of this assault on Commander Pierre Lafontaine's right, but they've been lagging behind and the attack has to go ahead without them. It should all run like clockwork, because as it happens, the French are prepared for this exact scenario. The French 10th Corps had run through that situation about 3 weeks earlier during a map exercise precisely on that same terrain. At that time, the Corps Reserve was to be used in case of German breakthrough at Sedan. At first, it was to occupy a rear defense position, Objective 1, between Chemeri, Boulson, and the edge of the woods south of Haraucourt. Then, using the Boulson springboard, a counterattack was to drive the penetrating enemy all the way back to the edge of the Bois de la Marfée. But clockwork is more of a Swiss thing than a French thing, it seems, because the advance is a mess. The tanks move slowly in step with the infantry, employed entirely in a supporting role and nothing more adventurous. The line advances in a flat, almost World War I style maneuver, focused on maintaining integrity and not allowing individual companies to pull ahead. This means that it's the slowest unit in the line which is determining the pace of the attack. And the entire thing chugs to a halt multiple times while they wait for troops to catch up. I said they get underway at 7:30. Well, by 8:45, they've made it 2 kilometers down the road. That's about half as fast as a leisurely stroll. It's not all been walking, though. They have had brief skirmishes with advanced German recon, which is not exactly a good thing for the French, because now the Germans are aware of them and are coming to meet them. About 8:45, the first German tanks roll up onto the high ground at the Boulson Ridge. 6 Panzer IIs, 8 Panzer IIIs of the 4th Battalion, 2nd Panzer Regiment. They're up against the 13 French FCM 36s that make up 1st Company. The tanks come into view of each other only about a kilometer apart, well within range, so the firefight begins almost immediately. It might be a surprise to you, considering how much we've spoken about German panzer tactics, but it's actually the French tanks who quite comfortably win the engagement. 2 panzers are destroyed, and all except one of the others are disabled. Thing is, though, it's all just too slow. In the time it's taken the French to rout 1 panzer company, 3 more have come across the bridge, and those are now committed to battle by 1st Panzer Division Commander Friedrich Kirchner, alongside infantry from the Großdeutschland Regiment. 2 panzer companies and Großdeutschland attack Boulson, and the final panzer company heads to relieve defenders near Connage, where a German anti-tank position has stopped the left side of the French advance. The German panzers this time seized the initiative a little better and score penetrations against the French tanks by flanking them and then firing into their weaker side armor. The FCM-36 only has a crew of 2, so they're pretty easy to disable with a decent shot. Grossdeutschland supports the attack, pushing back the French infantry positions and silencing anti-tank guns. By 10:45, the fighting has taken such a toll on the French that La Fontaine sounds a full retreat. Only 10 French tanks make it out, mostly from 2nd Company over at Cornage. La Fontaine takes his defeated troops, and that includes the 55th Division, which has been on the verge of completely shattering since their ordeal on the Meuse yesterday, and pulls back beyond Flavigny's forces massing near the woods to the south. This allows the Germans to press the attack and seize the original French jumping off point, Chambéry. There is then a mishap here on the German side. A commander's conference began at noon in the square in front of the church in Chambéry, which had just been captured. At that same moment, German dive bombers attacked the village and hit the vehicles parked on the square. The commander of the 43rd Assault Engineer Battalion and 3 officers of the 2nd Panzer Regiment were killed, and the commander of the 1st Panzer Brigade and a number of other officers and enlisted men were seriously wounded. At 10 a.m., Guderian had gotten on the radio and repeatedly asked the previously requested dive bomber raid should be scrubbed or that it be shifted to the south. Obviously, however, he was too late to stop the Luftwaffe in the midst of its attack. The panzers had attacked with such speed that they were even too fast for the Luftwaffe. Speaking of the Luftwaffe, they're fighting a fierce defensive effort against a concerted Allied effort to bomb the military bridges at Sedan. The French Armée de l'Air and the British Royal Air Force set out to destroy the pontoon bridges over the Meuse. General Billotte, commander-in-chief of the 1st Army Group, tells the Air Force, victory or defeat will depend on those bridges. And the Allies throw everything they've got into the fight here, at the expense of air cover elsewhere. As General Marcel Tetu, commander of the French Tactical Air Forces, puts it, concentrate everything on Sedan. Priority between Sedan and Wu is at 1,000,000 to 1. Everyone knows this is going to be a real all-or-nothing effort. During mission conferences, French pilots are told to take inspiration from the sacrifice of the French cavalry during the original Battle of Sedan back in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. Here, the cavalrymen had mounted a desperate frontal charge against enemy artillery in an effort to break encirclement by the Prussians. The Allies are able to muster about 152 bombers and 250 fighters. Almost all of the bombers are British. The French have about 240 operational bombers ready to fight, but they only send 43 today. The RAF manages to pull together 109 bombers. But even with some 400 total aircraft, the Allies undermine their efforts by sending in the planes in drips and drabs starting in the early morning. Instead of massed formations, the Germans only have to respond to raids of about 10 to 20 airplanes. Guderian still takes the threat from the air very seriously indeed, because just a few lucky hits could seriously scupper his operation. By now, Sedan is bristling with German anti-aircraft guns. Taking together the flak battalions of the 1st, 2nd, and 10th Panzer Divisions, along with the Luftwaffe's 102nd Flak Regiment, he has 5 battalions for a total of over 300 heavy and light anti-aircraft guns. In a twist of fate, some of these guns are located near a monument to that French cavalry charge of 1870 that I just mentioned. Allied pilots refer to the gauntlet of flak and machine guns as the hell along the Meuse. Still, the French and British pilots press home their attacks bravely, powering in at low level. As one German officer recalls, again and again, the Potez and Moran aircraft attack their targets with tremendous dash in daredevil low-level flight. It takes dash and daring to dive down so deep into the hell put up by our flak, but the French know, as we do too, what it means if the bridge were to be destroyed. They failed. Again and again, an enemy aircraft dives out of the sky, trailed by a long black plume of smoke that, after the impact of the following explosion, hovers perpendicularly for a while in the hot air. During the short time I spent at the bridge, hardly an hour, 11 enemy airplanes were knocked down. The RAF does make one big raid today, between 4 and 5 p.m., with something like 70 Bristol, Blenheim, and Ferry battle bombers. The battles in particular prove themselves wholly inadequate. They are slow, outdated, poorly defended, and they are being pushed into a role that they were not designed for. The raid as a whole is a disaster. In level bombing, the pilots are unable to drop their bombs with enough precision to hit thin targets which are just a few meters wide. The fighters are unfamiliar with ground attack technique, and they take heavy losses trying to strafe the flak positions. During this one raid, the British lose about 40 bombers. The story is the same for the day as a whole. The French refer to May 14th as a black day, and Churchill writes that the RAF's losses are particularly cruel. In total, the Allies lose 167 airplanes. That's 52 bombers and 50 fighters shot down, with another 65 badly damaged. Mass daylight raids over the Meuse are now out of the question, and the Allies effectively concede the sky over the Meuse to the men of the Luftwaffe. All of Guderian's bridges are left intact. The air is now clear, and he can now focus on getting as much of his force across the Meuse as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, the Germans have a stroke of luck and discover something that will speed up their advance. Amidst the carnage of Chemeri and the friendly fire incident I mentioned earlier, the Germans find a bridge, an intact one at that. The road west out of Chemeri crosses the Ardennes Canal near Malmy and offers a fantastic opportunity to swing west as 19th Panzer Corps Commander Heinz Guderian wants to. But why settle for one when you can have two? Another similar bridge is found at Pont-Navarre, where the Ardennes Canal joins the Meuse up near Sedan. For all the good work the French did in blowing the bridges as the Germans approached, they've dropped the ball when it comes to the bridges behind their lines. Now, Guderian is thinking about getting his western thrust going today within hours of finding these bridges. He looks at the terrain on the far side of the Ardennes Canal, sees the hills and woods over there. He knows more French units are out there and they're digging in. And just then, in this precise context, he makes a snap decision that will reverberate throughout history. He disregards all previous orders and commits 2 of his 3 panzer divisions to the charge without authorization. This violates his orders from his superior, Ewald von Kleist, violates orders from Chief of Staff Franz Halder, even violates the wishes of Adolf Hitler himself. All of them are nervous about pressing the attack before infantry units have moved up to secure the front against a counterattack. Guderian ignores all of them. By 3 o'clock this afternoon, the 1st Panzer Division is advancing over the Chemeri Bridge, and 2nd Panzer Division over the Pont-Navarre Bridge. It's not long before 1st Panzer encounters French forces. These are the 3rd Spahi Brigade at La Orne and elements of the French 14th Division at Bouvelles-le-Mont. The speed and surprise of the attack threatens to overwhelm them. By the evening, both units are forced to withdraw, and the 3rd Spahi Brigade is basically no more. 1st Panzer Division ends today around here, with 2nd Panzer stopping directly north of them. At this time, the German position at Sedan is actually really vulnerable. The Grossdeutschland Regiment is still there, and in theory, they have 10th Panzer Division for company, but they're still trying to get across the river. Things could be about to go really badly for them, because Jean Flavigny is about to attack from the south. Or is he? He had initially wanted to attack around midday, following after La Fontaine's smaller morning offensive. But the commander of his 3rd Armored Division says he needs more time to get into position and fuel his tanks, and that the attack couldn't possibly begin until around 8 or 9 that evening. Flavigny thinks this is absurd, that he could have done that way sooner. But he gives him an extra 2 hours and tells him the assault must start at 2 p.m. That time, or an hour later even, would actually be pretty perfect. By the time they came up on the German positions, the 1st and 2nd Panzer Divisions may well have already been across the canal, giving them a chance to trap most of Guderian's corps in a pocket. As it happens, because of how ineffective the French command and control is, tanks from 3rd Armored don't even begin moving to their jumping off point until 1 in the afternoon. And Flavigny has to sit and stew while waiting for the division to finally be ready to advance, which isn't accomplished until 5:30. So what happens next? Flavigny suddenly, at the critical moment, scraps the attack entirely. It turns out that routed troops from La Fontaine's forces have been passing through his lines all afternoon, and he's been speaking to them. They're talking about facing hundreds of panzers, maybe even thousands. They're talking about the Stuka dive bombers and the fearsome 88s that the Germans are bringing up. All of the delays here have given Flavigny time to think about it. Too much time. Now, when his intervention might have completely changed things, he backs down. He orders his troops to spread out and make defensive preparations. His boss, 2nd Army Commander Charles Hunziker, is not happy. Now let's go north and check in on Erwin Rommel. Yesterday, Rommel's 7th Panzer Division made 2 bloody river crossings and secured a couple of bridgeheads. The first was just south of U, and the second just to the north of Dinan at Leffe. By nightfall last night, Rommel was already transporting panzers across on ferries while his engineers constructed a bridge. The French troops in the sector have fought well and have managed to contain the bridgeheads for now, but the response from higher up the chain of command has been slow. The very limited counterattack launched by the French 11th Corps last night basically petered out as the tanks and armored cars had no infantry support. Rommel makes a big move early this morning, and he sends the 7th Rifle Regiment under Georg von Bismarck to capture Unai, which is about 5 kilometers from Dinan. Rommel soon receives word that the regiment is being surrounded. It's here that one of his decisions from yesterday saves the day. Remember, unlike Guderian, Rommel didn't wait until his pontoon bridge was finished before he started bringing his armor over at Leffe by ferries. Already, he has something like 30 panzers there. So now he orders these tanks to push on towards Unai and rescue the riflemen. Rommel himself heads over in his Panzer III command tank and even has a very narrow escape when the vehicle takes a hit from a French anti-tank gun. Rommel tells the story. Shells landed around us, and my tank received 2 hits one after the other. The first one on the upper edge of the turret, and the second in the periscope. The driver promptly opened the throttle and drove straight into the nearest bushes. He had only gone a few yards, however, when the tank slid down a steep slope on the western edge of the wood and finally stopped, canted over on its side, in such a position that the enemy, whose guns were in position around 500 meters away on the edge of the next wood, could not fail to see it. I had been wounded in the right cheek by a small splinter from the shell which had landed in the periscope. It was not serious, though it bled a great deal. In the end, it turns out that Rommel needn't have moved so quickly. The threat of encirclement turns out merely to be an error in the transcription of a radio message. And after a tough fight with the French 1st Light Cavalry Division, the German panzers assist the riflemen in taking Unai. Rommel's tanks then push further west, making it about 12 kilometers west of the Meuse to Morville. By evening, the pontoon bridge at Dinan is finished, so Rommel can start bringing his armor over in full force and prepare to exploit the breakthrough. I said last time that bridging resources are limited. Well, with only enough materials and men to construct one bridge, Rommel has taken a fairly Machiavellian approach and ensured that it is his division which gets dibs. Max von Hartlieb, commanding the 5th Panzer Division, has protested about this to no avail, and he now has to request permission for his own tanks to use the bridge after Rommel's. Rommel has even gone a step further and has successfully purloined some of those tanks to support his own 7th Panzer Division's advance. He has dismissed Hartlieb's objections and accused the neighboring division of being too passive. Panzer Corps Commander Hermann Hoth dislikes Rommel's self-centered behavior, but he can't deny the logic. Rommel has already achieved a breakthrough, and Hoth can only get enough tanks across the river quickly enough to support one such effort. Things are less dramatic in the 5th Panzer Division sector. That morning, French 2nd Corps launches its overdue counterattack, the one that was postponed from last night. Commander of the 5th Motorized Infantry Division, Jean Boucher, has the 2nd Battalion of the 129th Infantry Regiment, elements of the 4th Light Cavalry Division with armored cars, and a company of Hotchkiss tanks from the 4th Armored Reconnaissance Regiment. They attack in the morning, aiming to dislodge the German infantry holding Ole-Bastia. But by now, much of the French advantage has disappeared. Yesterday, the German riflemen were without tank support, but the 5th Panzer Division has managed to get a few tanks across the river. In the end, the fighting is fierce, but the Germans prevail. The efforts of 5th Panzer Division are really more of a sideshow given what Rommel is doing further south at Unai. The French are rushing to stop him. With the 2nd and 11th Corps having failed so far in their task, Commander of French 1st Army Group Gaston Bilot has pulled some forces from his armored reserve and given them to 9th Army Commander André Korat with orders to clear the Dinan pocket. But things are already running into trouble. Because of a communications breakdown, the force in question, the French 1st Armored Division, only actually receives its orders at 2 p.m. today. Then it takes another 2 hours before the division's first elements actually start moving slowly along roads jammed with fleeing civilians, and one battalion of tanks actually manages to get lost. Things are moving so slowly that Korup tells Divisional Commander Marie-Germaine Bruneau, "You must counterattack this evening with all that you have. That's a formal order." In the end, though, there is no counterattack. Bruneau's tanks are low on gas, and the trucks with the gas are stuck in the traffic jam, so the tanks take up positions just north of Flavion and wait for them to arrive in the morning. Meanwhile, Rommel's 25th Panzer Regiment, which carries its gasoline supplies in handy portable jerry cans, continues its advance from Aulnay and ends up bedding down at Morville, just 5 kilometers away. Neither side has any idea that the enemy is literally just a stone's throw away. The French are planning some more significant stuff at the army level, though. There is, in fact, an entire French army being moved to this front. Yep, as the 9th Army starts to unravel under attack from Panzer Corps Hoth and Reinhard, the commander of French forces in the northwest, Alphonse Georges, decides to insert Robert Touchon's 6th Army into the emerging gap between 2nd and 9th Armies. Touchon's force is very much a last-minute improvisation, though. He's been given command of a few units pulled from the reserve, the 2nd Armored Division, the 14th Infantry Division, and the 36th Infantry Division. He's also been promised another 3 infantry divisions. Those units will arrive over the next couple of days. Although the force looks pretty capable on paper, and Touchon is experienced and competent, that doesn't change the fact that his new army is really a mixed bag of units arriving piecemeal. Things aren't all smooth sailing for the Germans, though. At Monthermé, the lead elements of Reinhardt's Panzer Corps are still held up by the defenders. The slow progress means that Panzer Group Kleist risks being broken up. I'll explain. The French 42nd Colonial Infantry Regiment is fighting hard and has held up Werner Kempf's 6th Panzer Division at the Monthermé Peninsula. There is no way that the Germans can get through today. This may seem like a minor holdup, but as I said the other day, the command in Army Group A resents the idea of Kleist's panzer force having operational independence and functioning as a self-contained mechanized spearhead in advance of the infantry formations. In the end, Army Group Commander Gerd von Rundstedt decided on a compromise. If Panzer Group Kleist could break through and keep ahead of the infantry, then it would retain its independence. If not, it would be placed under the command of one of the field armies. Although Guderian has already broken through, Army Group A takes the difficulties at Monthermé as an excuse to terminate the experiment. In part, this is prompted by the 3rd Infantry Division, which was supposed to be well behind Reinhardt's motorized force, having now made their own crossing of the Meuse at Nouzonville. The infantrymen aren't really going anywhere quickly, but it's a black mark against Reinhardt and Kleist that these foot soldiers have caught up with and even overtaking some of their panzers. So Army Group A orders that effective from noon tomorrow, May 15th, Panzer Group Kleist will be placed under command of Wilhelm List's 12th Army. The War Diary of Group Kleist notes, "Everything depends on whether we are now able to get across the Meuse, when we are temporarily stopped on our own strength so that we may thus retain operational freedom of action. Otherwise, there would be reason to fear that the fast-moving formations would now be employed sticking very closely to the infantry corps with a correspondingly shorter range objective. That would practically have signified the end of the von Kleist group as an independent operational formation." And that is where I shall leave things today, with Rommel and Guderian tasting success, and Reinhardt under pressure to get into gear. The Allies cede control of the skies over Sedan to the Luftwaffe and inexplicably cancel their counterattack. With bridgeheads secure, panzers rumble across bridges at Dinant and Sedan. So what will happen next? Will the French armored counterattack at Flavion turn the tide in the north? Do La Fontaine, Flavigny, and Hunziger have any idea how to turn things around? I mean, there's an entire new French army moving to the front. That's gotta be good for something, right? And there's a huge mass of French armor assembling at Flavion. Surely they must be able to hold back Rommel and Hartley. I'm telling you now, May 15th is going to be a dramatic episode indeed. You do not want to miss it. Our Time Ghost Army Ardennes amigo of the week is Stephen Wood. It is people like Stephen Wood who give us the fuel to keep Time Ghost running. They're the jerry cans to our panzer divisions, if you will. Yeah, okay. You can join the fight at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. And make sure to subscribe, and I will see you next time when we look at May 15th, 1940.